Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and today we are going to be talking about how to make an awesome Christmas using analog tech. We're in early November, so this is kind of, I think, a hard conversation for some of us to wrap our brains around because, well, we shouldn't have to be talking about Christmas yet. But this is 2021, and the crazy part about this year is we've had an entire year plus of totally jammed up shipping, and we've been warned by companies that their shipping is going to be delayed. The U.S. Postal Service has warned of delays. Amazon, actually, if you go on and check your shipping, they're like, hey, you're ordering this on November 1st. You will get it by maybe December. Like, things are delayed, and there are companies as you go around who will be warning, like, hey, you have to order by X date in November if you plan on getting this in time for Christmas. Like, they're just warning of long delays. So in order to kind of have this conversation, it's like, well, this is something I normally would do in December, but it's no longer useful there. Right? Like, it's more of a what should you have done conversation at that point. So we're having this in early November. And my hope in having this conversation now is to kind of prep your minds and your hearts as loving parents. You want to give your kids good things, right? You want to give your kids the desires of their hearts, as long as they're not self-destructive or anything like that, right? But how do we make sure that our technology purchases or our gift purchases are actually reflecting both the gospel and what we expect from our children when it comes to technology? So we're going to have that conversation today, like what kind of tech, how do we still wow our kids with our gifts, and how do we make these intentionally fun and amazing in this digital tech world with so much of this really, really immersive tech being pushed and sold and advertised? How do we help our children both find enjoyment in real life and joy in these fun gifts that we want to be able to give them? So that's today's conversation. And with no further ado, let's get this conversation started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. Thank you to everyone who has made this podcast possible. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you have not subscribed yet, please do. If you have not rated and reviewed, please do. You can scroll to the bottom and there's a little, if you're listening in like iTunes or Apple Podcasts, little purple text there at the bottom. You can't leave a review through something like Spotify, but you can still subscribe. So please do that. Thank you for doing it. It's amazing to have you guys be a part of this conversation. And subscribing does two things. It means that you'll automatically get updated every Tuesday morning. When this podcast comes through, it'll go right to the top of the list because you subscribe to it. And it will tell other people that, hey, there's this podcast that people like you seem to listen to. And that's a neat opportunity for us to benefit from the algorithms that are out there, sending people stuff in their feeds anyway. So why not send them something that's going to help them love God and use tech? So thanks for being on this journey with us. All right, today's conversation, it is about how to wow our kids with an analog Christmas. Again, if you're new in this conversation, analog, this idea that we're talking about analog adventures, we are talking about a non-digital adventure in that case. And it's not that digital is bad. In fact, some of our suggestions and ideas will actually be digital, but there really are two types of technology. So this needs to be kind of basement level understanding in this conversation today, is that there is tool tech and there is drool tech. So this isn't just stuff that plugs into a wall. It's not just if it has a screen. It is why is it designed and how does it work? So tool tech helps us create. It operates at the pace of real life because you can't create something faster than your brain can work. And it is always dependent on the user. So tool tech will stop working when you stop working. So something like word processor would be a good digital example of tool tech, but it can be anything from a nail gun to a microphone to any of these things, right? It's working while you work, and then it's no longer creating the product when you stop driving that piece, right? So that's our tool tech side. On the drool tech side, you have the fact that it is consumption driven. So it's usually been tool tech for somebody else. They made it, and now you are consuming it. That doesn't make it bad, but does make it different, and I'll explain why in a minute. It is overstimulating. They operate faster than real life, typically because one, that's part of what makes them engaging, and two, because we can do multiple drool tech things at the same time. So I can be on social media while I watch a show, while I listen to music, right? While I play a game. And the reason that's important to remember is drool tech, because it can be overstimulating, can lead to some unhealthy behaviors and habits. Some of those are designed intentionally. Some of those are just the way it happens when we do things that are overstimulating repeatedly, frequently, and we start to tie our enjoyment to it. We get kind of a dissatisfaction if we're stuck in a pace of life, which is normal life, that doesn't keep up with that. But in addition to that, these drool tech typically have designed rewards, right? They're designed for what we would call engagement. And engagement in and of itself is not bad. We want things to be fun. We want them to draw our attention, but there's really no limit right now in digital design on drool tech for how engaging something can be. So really simple user design might just be autoplay, right? If you don't get up in 5 seconds, the next video is going to play. That's fairly docile, right? It's fine. It causes a few fights with my children when they're watching Wild Kratts and then another one just autoplays before I can get in the room, right? And they don't have to disobey me, right? They didn't click play. It just started. And if I'm not paying attention, that can get out of control, right? So that's a simple version. In social media, it would be a pull to refresh when you have to swipe down, and then it gives you, slot machine style, a new feed of information, and you can just do that infinitely. And on the converse side, infinite scroll, right? If you keep going down your page, you never hit the bottom because it just keeps sending you more and more information based on what you like and what you pause on and what you click and what you comment on. So that being said, those are user design pieces, and those are just some of the examples. But today we're not talking about user design. We're just saying drool tech has it, tool tech doesn't, right? Microsoft Word or Apple Pages doesn't care if you continue using it. You click save and load out. It's like, are you sure? Like, we've got more fonts for you. Like, that's not what it does, because it's a tool and it's there for you to use. And drool tech is there for you to consume. And frankly, if they can get you to stay another 30 seconds or 5 minutes or 15 minutes, right? It's good for them. And that's how they are designed. And that's why drool tech can be so unhealthy. So in today's conversation, we had to know that. We got to know tech. There's two types, tool tech and drool tech. And we're talking about analog adventures because this is what can we do for an adventure that happens at the pace of real life is the way we're saying that. So it is mildly euphemistic. I do claim that, but analog adventure is, I believe, an accurate picture for what we're going for. Things that happen at the pace of real life that are fun. They still increase our awe. They remind us of who God has made us to be, and they allow us to experience the fullness of life rather than detract from it or sacrifice aspects of our lives in order to get this pursuit of enjoyment going. So that's kind of base level. So let's tie this in with the gospel. We want to remember today that we're talking about Christmas. So this idea of a gift needs to be grounded in that because it's very easy, especially in America. I know not all of our listeners in America or are in America, but in the United States of America, we have made Christmas something crazy. And it's easy to get caught up because I'm a parent and I love my kids to be happy. And we actually believe this idea that, well, if I buy this for them, they're going to be happy, right? This is going to somehow fix some of their brokenness. And we need to be careful with that because we then project that to our children and we use our finances to reflect that. And that's a lie. Like, they're not going to be happy because I got them this gift or toy. They will enjoy it. But their happiness and their joy comes from being settled in who they are in Christ and knowing that there is a living God who loves them and experience that, not just knowing about it, not just hearing Bible verses, but actually having experience with the living Lord in their lives. So that's why we read the word with our kids. That's why we worship with our family. That's why we instruct and discipline our kids, because that's what the Lord does to us, right? And when hard things happen in life, that's why we talk that out with our kiddos, right? Because those are the things that are going to allow them to be settled and whole and happy, joyful, and not simply distracted, right? Or medicated with some digital escape or other, or even worse, some other thing that they get into. We instead want them to be whole and focused on who and what they're created to be in Christ. We've used before this verse of Ephesians 2:10, right? That we are God's workmanship, created for good works he's prepared beforehand for us to do. And that's this idea that Christmas is about, hey, this is God's fulfillment of a promise he made in Genesis 3:15 that he wasn't going to leave us broken and rebellious. Instead, while we're broken and rebellious, God's actually going to send his own son to die in our place, and that's what Christmas is celebrating. Hey, this is God's rescue mission. Like, this is, in the fullness of time, this promise coming for us, and this is a big deal because this is what the entire rest of the year is about, is living in light of the fact that this happened. It wasn't an accident. Jesus came on purpose, and when he died, that wasn't like things going badly. That was the plan, so that the perfect sacrifice could be offered, and that in his stead, right, or in our stead, he could die, rise again to new life, and we then could become the firstborn of many brothers and sisters, right? Siblings in Christ. We're heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. And the reason that matters when we're talking with our kiddos is because gifts are now this expression of that, right? Like, I can give you a good gift, even a gift that causes sacrifice on my end, not because I think it's going to make you happy, but because I know it will. And this is just one way I want to love you, because you want this thing, and it's going to be good for you, and it's going to be fun for you, and I want you to have all that. So enjoy this gift, but don't think for a minute that it is the end game, right? Like, this is just a reflection of it. And as parents, we need to actually be praying into that and actually be thinking about that. And even in our own lives, like, do we have things we're setting our hearts and minds on that we're like, man, once I get X thing, then things will be good for me? Like, that's not true. So that's foundational for today's conversation. Excuse me. Wow. The gifts are the expression that they should build wonder, not escape. Even if they are analog, there are plenty of outlets for escape. Some of us escape in work. Some of us escape in sports and exercise. Some of us escape through board games and through reading and through academic success. And this idea is like, I need to run away from real life rather than processing it and repenting and giving that to the Lord and saying, Lord, I have fear in this area. I have anxiety in this area. I have just a lot of anger in this area, or I want to prove myself that I'm worth it. Instead of letting the Lord use those things, we try to take them to prove ourselves. So those aren't good. And we can also do that in digital tech. In fact, Drool Tech is kind of designed to do that. Like, oh, you don't feel like you belong? Come here. We have an app for that, right? Like, oh, you don't feel like your life is exciting? Like, come on, I've got a game for you. Like, just escape into this and that'll be fine. And many of us kind of listen to that siren's call, and we give up what the Lord's asking us to do. We give up opportunities to really grow and glorify the Lord in areas that maybe didn't sound exciting from the outset, but instead are way more exciting. And then the final reminder. So we've got to remember that these are an expression of the greater gift in light of Christmas. We got to remember that these are to build wonder, not escape, and that these should be Philippians 4:8 and Galatians 5:22, right? So when we look at a standard for a gift, these are how we know, like, there actually is a biblical standard for what we should take joy in, and these two verses really encapsulate that well. And just because I can never hear this enough, let's read it right now. Philippians 4:8 says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is anything excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things," right? So that's our first standard of, like, all right, we're going to be buying this gift. That's what we need to be thinking about. The second is Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law, right? So we have this now standard of, all right, does this gift do these two things? Awesome. Then we can move on to this big conversation. Now, I do want to give this preface. So this conversation started because Anna and I had the opportunity to do a road trip with a couple friends this last weekend, and this came up. The conversation was, hey, what do we do when our kids want to have awesome gifts and we want to give awesome gifts to our kids, right? But they ask for something that doesn't line up with our family expectations, or that we believe or even have seen is not helpful for them, or just they're gifts that we don't want to have go down a wrong path, right? Where we kind of give them this, if you will, pardon the term, like some kind of gateway technology, right? That then splits off into some unhealthy behavior down the road where it would have been better to change our plans, right? How do we do that? So a little bit of context on that conversation, because I do think it's at least amusing, if not helpful for your understanding. So bear with me. But really so Anna and I said we did a road trip. This is not something we do really ever. I think this is by far the longest road trip we've ever done together. A friend of ours was getting married a couple states over here in the Northwest. He's a friend from college. He was one of our two most eligible bachelor friends, and he is now off the market, ladies. Very sorry. But we were like, man, we want to celebrate this, but it was on, his wedding was going to be Saturday at noon. Okay, well, we looked at flights. They're really expensive. It didn't really pencil out. Owen's, our oldest, birthday was Thursday. And we're like, shoot. So we have Owen on Thursday. We have to somehow travel to this event, which is probably going to take place on Friday since it's a noon wedding. Flights don't leave in time to get there by noon. Drive is 8+ hours. So you're going to leave at what, like 3 a.m. to get there on time? Like, that's not great. So we kind of talked it out. A couple of our other friends said, hey, let's road trip. So we minivanned it to Missoula, Montana. It was lovely. It was like an 8.5-hour drive. I got made fun of for making a line item itinerary of our trip of like, we'll be to this rest stop and this time. We're looking for coffee at this stop, right? Like I was detailed. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything on this trip. And we arrived, by the way, 5 minutes early. So pretty proud of myself despite usually my limited logistics knowledge, but we did this, right? This was this really cool thing. And in the process had this big conversation because what are you going to do? We ended up doing the whole trip, by the way, with no music. We just talked the whole time. So really good bonding time. That was fun. But this conversation, I was like, man, this is what we need to be talking to parents about. Let's talk about how do we have this. So one of the things that came up is, all right, we have grandparents who want big ticket items, right? They want to do just the knock it out of the park, big picture, like they want to have the awesome present and they have the funding to get it. What do we do? And so we kind of brainstormed this, and on the way back, we ended up actually picking up another one of our friends. So there were 5 of us that road tripped home. And this was a conversation we kind of kicked around for a while. So here's kind of what we came up with, and that Anna and I can at least be sure we stand behind, and we'd like to pass along and see if this helps you or is at least a conversational fodder maybe for you as you talk it out with your spouse or your friends in your church community or small group. So the big ticket item idea would be, all right, how can we make this awesome? They want the wow factor, but we don't want it to be unhealthy, right? So if your grandma or grandpa or your kids, your parents or your in-laws really want to buy that gaming system, right? Like, hey, we really want to get your kid a PS5. We finally found one. We really want to get them that Xbox or that new gaming console or whatever. I would challenge you to be like, hey, that's amazing. What about, and like counter offer. And the idea here being, man, I said this last year as well, and I'm going to reiterate it. Getting a gaming console or one of these systems, especially as a young kid, it really runs into 2 problems. One, all new games are designed to be highly engaging. They have behavioral design in them, and that's not like magic voodoo. It's just game designers know what makes us tick, and they can get you to come back more often than you would choose to, right? They can make you believe you need to play when you didn't even want to play. And they do it with social media, and they do it with shows, and they do it with everything else, but video games are especially good at this. And it comes in the form of interval and variable rewards. It comes in the form of some just behavioral design tricks, kind of like we talked about with the swiping and the scrollings. But the idea is modern gaming systems are not meant for young brains. They're just flat out not. Some of the game content is acceptable for young brains, but the design of the game itself is not in that grade. So if you find a game that's E for everyone, that doesn't mean it doesn't have behavioral design. It just means it doesn't have murder or sex or, demonic powers or anything like overly thematically intense in there. So I would encourage you to avoid new gaming systems. The Nintendo Switch is the closest to acceptable because it has really solid parental controls, but it undoes most of its positives by being so crazy mobile. And your kid knows it's crazy mobile. So they know they want to get their hands on it. They know they want to play that more. And it just builds a sense of dissatisfaction, and it will increase just kind of the tension at home of there's something fun your kid wants to do and you feel like it's over the top. And now you're creating more of these opportunities. Instead, you can counteroffer with something awesome. So there are in the analog adventure kind of big picture, some big ideas. So I would say grandma and papa want to buy that big ticket item, send them to something like, and we're just going to go for a broad range here. You might have younger kiddos. There are things in the Duplo or Magnetile area that are amazing, right? Bicycles also fit in really well here. Something that goes with adventure, right? And I'll break this into like little categories to get a little more specific here in a moment. But that idea, like, hey, let's grab a big ticket item. Magnetiles and Legos, I don't know if you guys have looked at these recently, but they're crazy expensive, but they are really cool. And they give our kids the opportunity to play and to have something fun, but they don't have to be driven from an outside force. Like they have to follow the instructions and build it themselves. And it's very hard to get overstimulated playing Legos, right? Or playing Magnetiles, but they're also nutty out of most people's price range. Like Magnet tiles for a 100-piece set is like $120 or something like that. One set is fine for a kid. We've asked for them for 3 straight Christmases. So we got a set for 3 Christmases in a row, and that's plenty for 3 kids to play with. But it sits out in like a woven, Anna's going to hate the way I describe that. It's like a giant beach bag with handles. It's not what it is. It's prettier than that, but I don't know how else to describe it. But just it sits out like in the main like play area and like just sits next to a chair. And they get thrown in there every evening. And every time we have community here or kids come and visit, right, those things come out and they are a staple, even all the way up to now our 8-year-old. So that's one way to do it. The outside thing, so I mentioned bicycles, but like the wave ramp is one that actually our friends suggested on this road trip. They said, hey, the wave ramp's been huge. Like all the kids in the neighborhood come over, and that's kind of the, it's what it sounds like. It's a bike ramp, right? So it comes up, it goes down. You can stack them if your kid is safe and knows how to do that. These are meant to be stacked, but I wouldn't start there. But you can buy a set of these and you can build the ramps you want or build jumps or do whatever you want with skateboards and scooters and bikes. So that is an awesome idea. If your family has kids and does not have a trampoline, please look into it. Walmart has specials a couple times a year, by the way. They'll ship it to you for like $250. I think we got like a 14-foot trampoline with, it comes with the side, what do you call those? I want to say the word curtains, but anyway, the protective things so the kid doesn't fall off and break their arm like we always did growing up. They are pretty epic these days. You don't have to buy a really top tier, although those are lovely. And then there are really cool options if you want to invest in things like robotics. Vex is a great route. So the Vex robotics sets, that's a mouthful, are more expensive. They're like $250 for the intro. So that'd be the Vex 123 is for little kiddos, and it basically teaches the basics of computer programming. It teaches the basics of robotics programming. Actually, the Vex 123 is only $100, and then the 3+ one is called the Vex Go, and that's $200. But the idea is this is for kind of robotics and engineering and STEM. It can be used for homeschool stuff, but it is a really cool program. And Owen, for his most recent birthday here this last week, and got one of the little like build a bulldozer sets. And it's kind of like Mindstorm, but Mindstorm's going through some transition. So this set is fully vetted and ready to go. There's free curriculum that you can like download, or you can pay money to get the physical book. But the Vex Robotics has some really cool opportunities, and you can go with things like snap circuits. So snap circuits they actually might fit into our next conversation of just kind of big picture gifts, but I'll say them here. So snap circuits just work on this idea of circuitry and having to have all the pieces connected, and how do you connect them in different orders to get different impacts based on what's connected, where the electricity runs from the source through, and how that impacts the things around it. So just an idea to think about as we are talking kind of big picture. The final one on the big picture would be going to do an event. So our kids are going to find out today, but Dude Perfect is coming to the Northwest. If you're not familiar with them, it's a YouTube group, bunch of buddies, did trick shots and played sports together, and people started viewing, and now they're like crazy successful at making videos about trick shots and playing sports. So our boys enjoy those, and we watch those usually as a family, like every other week when something comes out, and we're going to go see them live, right? And that's a gift where, they're going to get the cool t-shirt, and then we're going to go to this event, and we're going to see this live. We're going to have an experience together, and it's not just a consumable, right? It's something we get to do together, and and it's something we can remember and we can build on, and it's in line with Galatians and Philippians. It's positive things that our boys can get inspired, and they go and try to do their own trick shots. And we have to talk about why certain things are limited in our small backyard, in our suburban neighborhood. Like, hey, you can't do that rocket test because people will get hurt, right? But it is a really cool thing. So some of those experiences, if you're like, yeah, but my older kid, like all they want is this smartphone or this gaming device or this, VR set, and this would be that opportunity of like, all right, but what if you maybe even spent a little more, right? Grandma and Papa chipped in, and you get that weekend trip, or you get that really cool concert, you get that other thing that is an opportunity to share life with them. So that would be my challenge on the wows. When grandma and pop are like, how could we do this? Sell the experience and sell those big ticket items that are analog, that are exciting. Instruments are always falling into that, by the way. Get your family a keyboard or piano. Get your family that that program that they need for AutoCAD or whatever. Oh, by the way, I wrote my nephew who's very much into the AutoCADing. I have two nephews, both of them smarter than me, going and doing awesome things in engineering and design on Shape. On Shape is the program. He said it's free for students, or there's like a hobby version you can download, but your designs stay public. So if you want someone in your family who was like, oh, I'm super into Minecraft because I like building, get them into something like Onshape, because while building a Minecraft is highly entertaining, there comes a point where there's diminishing returns on the skills you're building, and something like Onshape is actually used by professional CAD designers and 3D designers to build buildings and test loads of objects. So that is a cool option. So then I promised we'd break this down into kind of smaller gift ideas. We have that big picture of like, all right, grandma and papa want the knockout item, or we want to do something really memorable, but I want to make this really practical. Like your kid says, hey, I want a smartphone, right? Like, okay, as I've encouraged you previously, smartphones, not necessary up through 18. Certainly you want your kid to get practice having a device. Certainly we want them to practice having integrity. That doesn't mean we have to put them in the lion's mouth, as it were, to see if they can trust the Lord in these situations. Instead, we can get them things like the Gab wireless phone or even the Wise phone. The main difference between those two is the Wise phone's like an adult's version. It's very shiny and sleek and professional. And the Gab phone is intended for young people to use it. It still looks like a smartphone, but it doesn't have the internet. It doesn't have an app store. And you can't send and receive images in your text. So you can still take pictures, but they're stored directly on your device. And that is actually true of both the Wise phone and the Gab phone. The Gab phone just runs mainly through like app icons that you click on, and the Wise phone works more like a phone. There's a menu and you select like calculator, GPS, camera. So that is one way to get around that. And I think I'll circle back at the very end to talk about like, well, what if my kid really wants video games? Because there is a reasonable solution to that. But let's break into this. All right, so we have kind of these categories. So your kiddo wants some activities. So let's run through great activities. We mentioned the bike already. We mentioned the STEM already. So that's the Snap Circuit, the VEX set, and Onshape bike, and the something like a waveform where you can kind of escalate that. Sports stuff, so you can get a basketball hoop if you're in my area, right? Like think about those big picture ideas that we can now invest in. Go, hey kids, like we're going to make this fun. The trampoline I mentioned, they are bigger than maybe normal, but we are making intentional investments of our time and our effort. And so I think in terms of that. Other activities include Henry William, my middle son, would say, puzzles, Dad. 100 to 300 piece puzzles. Go Buffalo Games. They have like great Star Wars and animals options. So again, 100 to 300 means normal humans can do them. If you look at art, something as simple as a Crayola art set. You get these little $15 to $25, and it comes with markers and pencils and crayons, and it's enough. And it's in its own little carrying case and box, so it's easy to store. And our kids love them because they can go to Art Hub Kids off YouTube, right? Take 5 or 7 minutes in a public device, in a public space. They watch a video on how to make a holiday tree monster, and which, by the way, if you don't know, is how you like fold the paper over so it looks like a tree, and then you open it and it's like a monster mouth, and it's like rah, eating presents and stuff. So if you didn't know, now you know. So you have a Christmas tree that is eating stuff, and they can then color it in with their own, and they don't have to like worry about where did my pencils go, or Hadley ate my last pencil, right? Or fed it to Ruby, which is usually what happens. Our dog gets a lot of pencils and crayons in these days. But if they want to build, you can go with the Legos and Duplos and Magnetiles, I just remembered that I didn't mention with Lego on the big set. So Lego can be great. Duplo can be great for mom and dad buying because you can get them for $40. But they can also be like pie in the sky, big projects to keep our kids busy for a long time. And I'd say last in this kind of activities category would be that ability to listen. And if you're expecting to say read, reads its own category. So we'll get back to that. But to listen, so something like an Audible, where we're listening to stories, or if you use your local public library and you can get stories from there to listen, I have found that parents are like, yeah, but how do I listen? Like, I don't want to leave my smartphone in there, and I don't want an internet connected device like an Echo Dot or something like that, because there are some parental controls, but they cause some ethical issues. The Echo Dot is intentionally listening. That's its job, is to listen. And ever since Amazon rolled off Sidewalk, which is the process of connecting every Amazon device in range to every other Amazon device, so that now Alexa is just constantly learning from all of the devices at the same time. So it's really beneficial for Amazon's AI, but it's not great. Like, we don't exactly know what that looks like on the back end as far as our data and the ability to build a user profile, because we've never had anyone that had that kind of access to us and our kids in our rooms, in our houses, right? While I also agree, Echo Dot's not the best. So here's two. You can go with something like the Bose Color. I believe it's called the Bose Color 2 now. There's a second one, but something like that, or any kind of Bluetooth speaker system where it's going to be able to play music. It doesn't have an internet connection. It doesn't have an artificial interface built into it where you can talk to it and tell it to do things. It just plays music and then quits, and you can directly upload that from your phone. So that would be an investment you could make and say, hey kids, we got an Audible account. We got you this speaker, and you can listen to like our kids right now love the Swiss Family Robinson, and they love like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And as they were younger, we would slow it down. In Audible, you go like, all right, this is a 0.8 speed, right? And so they talk a little slower, and you can hear it. And that's how they would fall asleep. You put it at really low volume, and we would play that for them after we'd read to them and prayed and done our bedtime stuff. This would be kind of a way instead of just a sound machine or something. And they really enjoyed that. And you can then listen to it on car trips, and it interchanges nicely, but you don't have to have all that interactive tech in their bedroom. Instead, it's just basically a dumb speaker, which is cool. We want dumb. That's very helpful for us when it comes to technology. So those are some options. Then we go, all right, well, what if the kids want to play, right? What can we get them? So you have sports stuff. So you can get your outdoor flag football and your Frisbee. And I mentioned the basketball hoop. And you can play games like Cube, which is like a block tossing game, kind of like bocce, which is another option here. Any of these kind of outdoor, but we're headed into winter, so it feels weird buying those games. So we'll go on to the list of like Nerf. You get Nerf guns if you're comfortable with that. I know some families aren't. Laser tag is what we just got Owen for his birthday. So we borrowed a set. It's Kids Lane laser tag. I think they're like $50 for 4 of them. And they work, but they're noisy. So Nerf is quiet, but you can lose pieces and choking hazards for little kids. Laser tag isn't, but they make just so much noise. So the boys have been playing in the garage. For Owen's birthday, we literally got boxes from Costco and taped them together as barricades and put them in the yard, and then had kids versus uncles. And we just ran around until it started raining inches and sideways, and then just the kids ran around and the uncles went inside. But those are ways for us to like, that's actually still tool tech, right? Where you're like, but Sutherland, that's like, it uses batteries and it makes noise, but it relies on your kid running and aiming and playing, right? Like, it stops as soon as your kid quits playing. There's no notification, right? There's no text that it sends out. There's no leveling where it's like, but if you come back, we'll give you extra credits, right? Like, none of that. It's just a toy, and you turn it on and you play with it, and you turn it off and you walk away. If you don't love that, go Nerf. If you don't love that, I don't know, let them throw pine cones at each other. That's fun. So get them a bag of pine cones. That'd be my encouragement. But that is an option. And then, of course, you have board games. And I just broke this down because it's like a sickness for me. I can't not. So board games. I believe every family on the planet would benefit from owning these board games. Carcassonne, which is like a puzzle game. You can play it with kids as young as 4 or 5. It's a puzzle game. You flip over a piece and you connect them and you get points by the end of it. Quirkle is basically like Scrabble with shapes and colors. So your job is to try to get 6 different shapes in a row or 6 different colors of the same shape. It's, again, easy to learn, hard to master. Ticket to Ride can be played, again, with kids, probably 5 or 6, but you're trying to ride trains around the United States. And you get points for completing tracks and you get points for completing destinations. Spot It is a great camping game and travel game because it's just these little round cards and you lay out 5 or 6 of them. I don't remember right now off the top of my head, but you try to find matching images on these. So there's like a puppy and a star and, a moon and all these different things. And if you find 2 with the one match, you shout out what it is and you grab those and you're all doing it simultaneously. The game Wingspan, which is a beautiful game with birds. It's a little bit older. You should probably have your kids be at least 6. Henry can play it. Owen can play it. But Wingspan is you're basically building an animal sanctuary, and then Azul, where you're building mosaics with tile pieces. So that's, I believe, like everyone could have those. Doesn't matter how much you like games. They're fun to play. They're not overly competitive. They don't play very long. Wingspan's the longest. You can play it in an hour. But all the other ones can be played in 30 minutes. And then you can go through a list. If you have a 2 to 4 year old, something like Hoot Owl Hoot or Hi Ho Cherry-O. Those are fun games. In addition to all the ones you probably already know about, right? Like, they could play Trouble or they can tinker around with some other game. So 4 to 7 year olds, I would say Zoolaretto, Blockus, or Richard Scarry's Busy Town. I Found It, and I Found It is EYE. That game is fantastic. If I only had to pick one, I'd say that one. Yeah, if Richard Scarry is the guy with like the little Robin Hood worm that drives the apple around, if that not rings any bells. He makes just like Busy Town books, and it's about the little cat and the worm and the people living their lives. And this game is like they have it on the floor, and it's like 6 feet long, and they try to get from the bottom of the map up to the top, and it's got some seek and find aspects to it. It's very fun for kids of multiple ages. 8 to 12 year olds. I am a personal fan of a game called Flashpoint. It's unique. And it's cooperative. So Flashpoint is your firefighters, and you get to pick what type of firefighter role you're going to play. So you can be the captain, or you could be the generalist, or you could be a medic, and you get to like basically try to save people out of these buildings as you take turns and the fire spreads, and you can put it out and all that. And I think for 12 plus, while there are lots of games, I will say the one my nephews most enjoyed at Cannon Beach this year when we did a family vacation was Downforce. It's a racing game. I had a pair of 17-year-olds, actually those engineers I mentioned earlier, who are both going to college in engineering and mathematics. Love Downforce. It's simple. So my sons play it with me, but it's a racing game. And you basically, I should warn you on this. There's a section where you place bets. So there's 3 parts where you bet who's going to win. Just call it guessing. You're guessing who's going to win, right? There's no money involved. You just are guessing, like I'm putting down a guess on who's going to win now based on my hand and where these people are. But that's part of how the points are added up. So I should warn our listeners before that comes through. You're placing guesses on who's going to win, and you get points if you actually do win, and if your guesses were accurate. So maybe Downforce was a poor choice. Not that I say that out loud, but I feel morally okay with it in my house. So you would have to make that decision for yours based on our standards we're given. And then, man, if you're like, all right, so in the car ride, our road trip ride, this came up. Yeah, but what about like group games? What should we be doing? I would say if you've got kids at least 6 years old, something like Dixit, Dixit, where you have these little pictures and you're trying to make a story for it. My caveat that I said in the car and I'll say here is if you haven't played that game, flip through the cards first, make sure you're comfortable. They're not, they're not inappropriate, but some of them are dark. The example I use is like there's one picture where it's like a teddy bear, like in kind of a dark room. It's a like watercolor painting. It's a teddy bear in a dark room with like a tear in it, and it has like a tear running down its cheek, right? And it's kind of a sad picture, and like that would impact my kiddos. So I pull those just because I can, and I'm aware that it's there before they are. So you might want to decide that, but the game itself is very solid. There's only a couple pictures, and again, you're not going to ruin a kid with it. It's just it may not be the vibe you're looking for if you're playing with little kiddos. And then for 10 pluses, Codenames. Codenames is a phenomenal game where you have 2 teams and you're basically trying to give one-word clues to your team members to get them to guess the right cards. So those are the games I would suggest, indoor and outdoor. The reason for games is they're quick, they're accessible, they can be done any day of the week with any groups of people, young, old, family, strangers. You can make games an awesome way to engage and to have fun and to see more of your kids rather than simply go consume an experience someone else has. So Video games are great, and movies are great. They're highly enjoyable. Even listening to music is highly enjoyable, but it is consumptive. Well, we can take things out of it. We don't want that to be the only form of amusement we have. So this is building the process of actually kind of working for fun, if you will. Don't say that to your kids. It's a terrible way to pitch it. But in our minds, right, we're intentionally slowing our brains down and we're creating fun. How about that? That's that's a nicer way to say it. So we're creating our fun, right? We're taking part of it. We're participating in the process rather than simply consuming our fun. All right. So then I said I'd get to reading, and here we are. I'm going to keep this succinct. I would say find some reading that fits in these categories. Reading that inspires awe might be something like Indescribable, which is a cool little illustrated children's devotional talking about God's creation and just how amazing God is and how he's constantly putting his love for us into the things around us, from sunrises to galaxies to our skin to just the different things he's made in our world and the different ways he's made us. So inspiring awe, whatever that might be for your family. Get a laugh. Narwhal and Jelly is a little animated. It's a illustrated children's kind of comic book, and there's 4 or 5 of them now. But Narwhal and Jelly, if you just look that up, it's on Amazon. You can get them single or in batches. But they're delightful. Kids will belly laugh. They're appropriate. They're kind, and they're well done. They have a good sense of humor. Find a way to learn in your reading. So the Encyclopedia of Animals is one of our boys' favorites. The Thing Explainer, if you have a kid with like an engineering mathematical mind that loves the way things work, Thing Explainer is fun too. But the Encyclopedia of Animals is just colored pictures of animals and lots of fun facts, just page after page. That's by Wide-Eyed, I believe, Wide-Eyed Books. Those are fun. And they also have Wide-Eyed Books also has like a world map one, which is really cool. Find something to read together. So Read Aloud Revival is a book I would encourage parents to engage. She also is, Sarah McKenzie is also on Instagram under Read Aloud Revival. So you can find her, and she does a great job. Honey for a Child's Heart is also a great resource on that. But books like Narnia is one we just finished. So I would start book 2, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But funny books are a lot of fun. So getting into books like Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or The Big Friendly Giant, or James and the Giant Peach, or Matilda. And do know these are British books, right, written in the 1960s. So some of the kids are rude, especially the naughty ones, the ones that are not indicative of behavior you want. So just know that going in. But read something together that is fun, that you enjoy, that is obviously positive for your kids learning-wise, but it's a positive experience for you to share with them. So it's not just turn on an audiobook and walk out, but you get this experience of reading with them and to them. And then I would encourage to listen as well and listen together. And I mentioned books to do that with. The most recent love for our boys has been Swiss Family Robinson, which the audiobook, I don't know, he speaks in a very proper British accent, which is a little distracting at times, but they like it. So there it is. All right. So that's when we're talking how we can have an amazing analog Christmas. These are some ways, right? We're putting adventure in it, but we're always making sure we're in the driver's seat of that adventure. And we're equipping our kiddos to do that too. I would say last but not least, this idea of, all right, we talked about what about the smartphone, Sutherland, but what about if my kid wants video games? There is a company. The idea with video games is because they can be designed in such a way to be so engaging, it's not a fair fight all the time. I would say go old school as you feel comfortable. And parents often have a hard time finding systems that either will play those games. So like, I can't find an original Nintendo, or I can't find an original Super Nintendo. Or they find these systems, they're like, oh, well, there's this retro system, but it comes with 30 games and there's 4 or 5 games on there I don't want my kid playing, right? Like, how do I, and there's no way to like parentally block certain games or delete the ones you don't like. They just come preloaded. An example for me and my family would be Castlevania. I don't want my boys playing the Castlevania games because the franchise has taken a crazy turn. There's a whole Castlevania Netflix series. And I don't want my boys being like, oh, I played that game. That must be cool, right? Like, I have to be thoughtful about where this game leads them because it is a franchise and there's lots of games for it and it's pretty dark. We don't need to go there. So the option would be this company called Analog. It's not inexpensive, but it is worth it if this is what you want to do. Analog it's not an emulator, but anyway, it's a gaming system that uses a new chipset to basically copy what a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo or a Sega or even a Game Boy does, and it plays the original cartridges. So you'd have to go on eBay or go into your attic and find those old cartridges, and then you can literally put them into the system, and it runs it exactly like an old school system would, except it uses digital outputs. So that means you can plug it into a modern TV, and you don't have to have any kind of converters or anything else. So it's about $220 for the system, a game, and a controller. So that's kind of your price point you're looking at there. Again, something for maybe grandparents. I would encourage you to try to not go digital games. Your kids will discover digital games. Our job is not going to be hard when getting them to be enthralled with digital gaming. Our job is to show them the adventure that the rest of life can be. And that, I believe, we've just done. I think there's lots of things on this list that you can do. My hope is that it is an example for them of your love for them, because you're giving them gifts because you love them. It's a reflection of what God has done for us with his son, and that every day is a gift. And that we would see it as such, not, man, I'm not going to be happy unless I have A, B, or C. So I hope this was encouraging for you. I hope it was helpful. I will tell you, I've tried really hard to get this to be short and quick, and it didn't work. I'm sorry, everyone. We'll get back under 30 minutes here in a little bit, but my hope for this is it's something you can think through and apply in this crazy year of having to buy gifts early. You can intentionally use Christmas as a season to remind our children of God's great love for them, which we're doing every day, but in intentional ways, and getting cool gifts and wowing them and having those conversations with family members who really want to get them that new distracting Oculus VR set, but you don't want your kid to have VR because you don't need them to be more distracted than they already are. You need them to be more present. And so I hope these gifts or ideas, these gifts or experiences, these gifts inspire will help and will be encouraging for you. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing, for being on this journey with us. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan, at gospeltech.net. You can find us at Love God Use Tech on Instagram and Facebook. And you can join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech.